Hey, welcome to the One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute with your host, the alchemist of Indiana's Black Forest, Alan Bishop. Hey, this channel is all about home distilling and legal distilling. If you've got questions, reach out to us in the comments below, social media, or via bishopshomegrown@gmail.com. And don't forget to check out thealchemistcabinet.com. Hey guys, back answering your questions in rapid fire succession. So I've got one here that I'm excited about and excited to see. I've actually got two here about absinthe, which is awesome because that means that people paid attention to the absinthe thing and they're getting interested in absinthe. So the first one is from Sam Bates. It is advice on wormwood for absinthe, please. So, hi Alan, love your YouTube channel. My mom and I are following your absinthe techniques and are scouring Australian gardens for botanicals. We made a couple batches of absinthe and love the expressions we've come up with. Our question is about acceptable wormwood varieties. The most common wormwood found down under is tree wormwood, Artemisia arborescens. We find it fragrant and pleasing to the palate. Is this acceptable to still call it absinthe? We sourced some small Artemisia absinthium, but we're years away from any meaningful harvest. Please see our examples attached. Thank you so much for your generous contribution to the craft from Melbourne and Adelaide, Australia. Regards, Sam. Man, that's an awesome question. So they also sent some picture here. So I don't know if you guys can see it or not. I'll hold it up there and let you check it out. With wormwood, the standard wormwood here on this side, and what they're dealing with over here on this side, I believe. Did I get that right? Yes, I did. So Artemisia absinthium, and then the arborescens, Absinthium arborescens. Anyways, so in regards to your question about whether or not that's still absinthe, I would certainly consider it still absinthe. Now, is it Swiss style or French style absinthe? No, not necessarily, but I don't think that's a bad thing. I think absinthe, just like gin, it warrants experimentation. It warrants regional styles, right? Continental styles even. And it's always had a little bit of a history of that. So, for example, here in southern Indiana, we actually had commercial absinthe producers in Switzerland County, Indiana, in the 1830s. These were Swiss Huguenots that originally came into Kentucky, to try to start a winery that had failed. They moved into southern Indiana right along the Ohio River and built the first real successful commercial winery in the United States, making sparkling Catawba wine. But amongst them were two absinthe distillers, and they said that they found wormwood when they got here. Now, there's no way, in my opinion, that they found grand wormwood on the Ohio River when they got here in the 1820s, 1830s. But what they likely did find was a type of ragweed that was very closely related to wormwood and is in fact a type of wormwood, and it does grow in abundance all over southern Indiana and does have those same bittering compounds. As a matter of fact, Justin and I have some honey that is primarily made up of that ragweed right now. We're about to play around with it. We might even do an absinthe project with that. But they were making commercial quantities of absinthe using that particular type of wormwood back in the 1830s in Switzerland County, Indiana, and they were making enough of it that they hired a cooper in that region to make barrels in order to send it by flatboat down to New Orleans, which is pretty cool, right? And that's pretty inventive. It's not the exact right species of Artemisia that would have been used in the Swiss Alps, but it's what they had on hand, and they recognized it was similar enough that they used it. The only thing I always caution people with on botanicals in general is make sure that they're safe for consumption. And I did not check on that particular Artemisia to see if it was safe for consumption, but I presume it sounds like you've done some research on botanicals and you probably have a pretty good idea. Typically here in the U.S. we have what's called the FDA GRAS list, GRASS. Generally, or is it GRAS? GRAS, sorry, I don't know what's going on in my head, but generally recognized as safe, right? These are things that are approved to be used as food additives or, herbal tonics, tinctures, that sort of thing by the FDA. Now, that doesn't mean that they're right about everything. They have some concerns in general with some things that they probably shouldn't, such as Artemisia absinthium and the amount of thujone that's in it versus sage, which has far more thujone in it, which they completely are fine with making sage oil. But it's worthwhile to always check and make sure that, something is fine for human consumption. But I certainly think that you are making something in the spirit of absinthe, and I'm happy to hear that you are doing it in Australia. That is freaking cool, and I take that as a victory in bringing absinthe back. The other thing to remember is there is no, at least in the United States, there is no regulation for what absinthe actually is, even amongst craft distillers, because it was never really re-legalized. It's really a fanciful name. It falls into what you call a distilled spirit specialty, which basically means it's whatever liquor that you produced with natural flavorings added to it that doesn't fit any other regulatory category. So drawing outside the lines a little bit is completely fine as long as you're true to the spirit of it, I think. And being home distillers, we don't have to play exactly within the rule book, right? We can color outside the lines as far as we want to. Hell, we can take that coloring page, pull it out of the coloring book, flip it over to the blank side, draw our own picture, and color it whatever color we want with glitter crayons, right? Again, as long as it's true to the spirit, I think you've done a fine job. So thank you very, very much for that email. I do have another Absinthe email here. If I can find it, give me just 1 second. And it is another just awesome one that I'm so glad to see come through. Give me just 1 second. I got to find all of it. Okay, here we go. So this one is titled Absinthe the First, and it's from TJE. Hello, Alan, and everyone at or watching the One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute. Well, I did it. I pulled the trigger and made my first absinthe. Built a little 15-liter or 4-gallon still to make it. Didn't want to wind up with 5 gallons of absinthe on my hands. I added the recipe you shared with Jesse, some info I took from your book, and an 1855 recipe I found on an Absinthe German website, which is at alandia.de for those who are curious. So jump to the question to keep this shorter, but I'm not going to jump to the question because I want to read what you did here because I think it's awesome, and I think the viewers will want to know too. To 4 liters of 85% high proof, 180 grams of wormwood, rough ground. You went heavy on the wormwood for sure. 110 grams green anise seeds, lightly crushed in mortar. 110 grams fennel, also crushed in mortar. 50 grams chamomile. I didn't have any hyssop, and I know chamomile grows wild in the Swiss and French Alps, so I'm sure it's been done before. It absolutely has been, and if you watch the upcoming podcast I did with Jesse as well, the next episode that we did on the later styles of absinthe, the Belle Epoque and Swiss styles, you will see that chamomile was used, and I do recommend it for Jesse. You'll also see the adjustments to make this less bitter than what I'm sure it came off on your still by adding more anise and more fennel and pulling the wormwood back substantially, which is what was going on during the Belle Epoque. 10 grams star anise just broken up a bit in mortar. All the above added to the preheated high-proof 70 degrees Celsius, call it 160 degrees Fahrenheit, allowed to cool, digest, and macerate overnight. Beautiful. Cut the 38%, distilled on the herbs and botanicals in my home-built pot still setup, and a bain-marie water bath, which gets me about 85% efficiency. Beautiful. Collected down to 70%. It seemed to just be done at that point. Nothing left to wring out. Collection temperature never exceeded 20°C/68F. Ran smooth and slow. To color the absinthe, I used 50 grams frozen spinach. Awesome. 36 grams dried mint. Added to 1.75 liters of clear absinthe at 70%. Placed in a water bath at 70°C for a half hour. This was allowed to cool, double filter through coffee filters, and added back to the rest of the batch. And done. It's freaking delicious. That's fucking awesome, man. The question. I have included a picture of my cuts before blending and coloring. As you can see, there's an increasing amount of color coming through in the distillate. Ignore the cloudiness in jar 2, just bad photography. Is it usual to have color show up in this process? It was basically an herbal porridge, so I'm not really shocked, but I've never seen it before except in the way down tails of some whiskeys. Even my distilled on the botanical gins don't do this. Thanks as always, TJ in the cold. So this is something that I did not touch on with Jesse that I probably should have, and I should in general with absinthe. And let me find a picture here of what he's talking about. So you can see the jars are numbered from this side over 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. And right around jar 2, 3, and then definitely into 4 and 5, you're starting to get some coloration come across. This is common with absinthe, with well-made absinthe in particular, and with certain botanicals in general. So coming off the still, it'll look clear. It'll look as clear as it can look, right? But you get it in bulk somewhere, in a jar, or in my case, at a commercial distillery in a large tote, and you look at it, and it'll have just a little green or a little yellow to it, right? And it depends on what botanicals you use and how much of each of those botanicals that you do use. This is completely normal. It freaked me out the first time I ever saw it when I was back at Copper and Kings, the brandy company I worked for. We did a ginger-infused absinthe, and it was clear coming off the still, but once it was in that tote, it had a yellow color to it. Completely normal. It's the amount of oils that you're pulling off during distillation and imbuing into that alcohol. You've done exactly as you're supposed to. You've done nothing wrong. It is normal for it to have just a little bit of that color. I suspect because of the amount of wormwood that you used in particular, that's where a lot of that color came from. And when you get ready to do a Belle Epoque, which is going to be closer to like 100 grams of wormwood, and more like 250 grams of anise and fennel, you're probably not going to see as much of that green coloration come over, but you see it in bulk, and you'll certainly see some of it in that distillate. So great job. And thank you guys both for sharing those Absinthe emails. That melts my heart, makes my day, and lets me know that I'm on the right track helping home distillers. So, hey, anybody else out there playing with Absinthe? If so, reach out to me, bishopshomegrown@gmail.com, and let me know, because I want to hear about what you have done and what you are experiencing. And be on the lookout for that second part of the podcast that I did with Jesse of Still It, and on the lookout for his next Absinthe adventure that he's working on now, I believe. And I'm looking forward to seeing the reactions to those things. I love y'all. Have a great one. Later.